"We're not including you in Christmas this year," my mom said in my own living room. I snapped back, "Then I'm removing myself from the mortgage." They laughed until the eviction notice hit their door. "My name is George. I am 34 years old. Yes, I'm the person who removed his name from the mortgage after my mother told me straight to my face that I wasn't invited to Christmas." But let's go back a bit, because this didn't just happen suddenly. This situation had been building slowly for years, like a small drip from a pipe in the ceiling that eventually exploded during a cold winter evening, soaking everything I believed was strong. I was always the helpful son, not the one they loved the most, not even close, but the dependable one, the one they called when the car broke down, the one who showed up when someone needed help with tax forms. My younger brother, Frank, was the one who got away with everything. He was the clear favorite. If I came home late during school, I was scolded. If he stumbled in at 3 a.m. smelling like alcohol, it was just boys being boys. I understood early that my role in the family was more like a tool than someone to care about. After college, I got a reliable IT job and saved money seriously. I didn't go out to parties, didn't travel, and didn't even replace my car. I had a goal to purchase a house before I turned 30, and I did. Well, sort of. That's where the story really begins. When I was 28, my mother phoned me during lunch and said she had a suggestion. I already knew what that meant. She always called it a suggestion when she wanted something but tried to make it seem like it would help me too. This time the suggestion was that she, my stepfather Henry, and Frank had found a great house but couldn't buy it without help. "It's big enough for everyone," she said, like we were some perfect family show. "We can grow stronger as a family here. You'll finally have a place to work from home." She also said I wouldn't have to pay rent anymore. The house was honestly beautiful. I won't lie. 2 floors, a large yard, even a small sunroom where I pictured putting books and plants. But of course, I would be paying the majority of the costs. They called it a good investment for me. They promised they would take care of the bills and food, and I would just pay the mortgage. Frank would get a job soon, my mom said, and would start helping. Henry had some job problems, but they were being worked on. It all felt uncertain. But I was tired of spending on rent. And honestly, part of me wanted to believe my family could finally work together. So I agreed. I added my name to the mortgage, used my own money for the down payment, and moved in with them. And for a short while, things felt okay. We ate together. Frank acted polite. My mom even looked proud of me. That probably gave me hope. I didn't realize I was falling for a fake dream. The first sign something was wrong came about 6 months later. Frank still had no job. He said he was looking, but really, he was staying up all night playing video games and blaming the system. Henry left the house early each morning, talking about some job, but no money ever came. Bills weren't being paid. There was less food at home. When I talked about it, my mom would tilt her head and say things like, "Well, George, you have a great job. You can take care of it, right?" I tried to stay calm. I kept thinking this was just for now, that they would get jobs soon, that I had to wait a bit longer. But I started feeling more like a cash machine with a bed instead of a person who owned the house. What made it worse was how they acted like the house was theirs. Frank always had people over. Henry replaced the locks and didn't even tell me. My mother moved things around in my office while I was away for work and turned it into her reading corner. The day I saw her opening my letters to check if anything was important, I almost lost control. Still, I stayed quiet. I had started meeting with a therapist, and they told me to set clear rules, so I did. I printed out a paper showing our expenses, pointing out what I paid for and what they didn't. I asked them to start helping. Not a lot, just a few $100s each month. They acted like I had asked them for something extreme. "We're your family," my mother said. Like that meant they didn't have to pay anything. "I know," I replied. "That's exactly why I let it go on for this long." Frank rolled his eyes and said under his breath that I cared too much about money. Henry didn't even come over to join the talk. After that, the mood shifted. Awkward, cold, and full of quiet tension. Frank stopped saying anything unless his internet was broken. My mom still cooked, but suddenly there wasn't enough food for me. They began holding private talks when I was gone, and I'd returned to a home that felt different. Furniture in new spots, tasks reassigned, new rules like no shoes in the lounge, but somehow that rule only applied to me. The real sting hit last November. I had been overloaded with tasks and was looking forward to the holidays. My work had been exhausting, and all I wanted was some peace during Christmas. I had even picked up a few decorations, just a tree, some simple lights, and a wreath for the entrance. I put everything up on a Saturday morning while they were out. That evening, they came home and looked at the living room like I'd committed a crime. "Why didn't you check with us first?" my mother asked, arms folded, staring at the tree like it had personally offended her. "I thought we were celebrating together," I said, totally puzzled. "We chose not to do Christmas this time," Frank replied. It's a waste of cash. We made that decision, Mom added. No one mentioned it to me, I responded. Well, maybe if you were here more often, she snapped, you'd be aware of what's going on. A heavy, hollow silence filled my chest. I just stood still, watching the blinking lights behind her. The way she spoke made me feel like I didn't belong, like I had intruded with my excitement and ruined their space, but I kept it in. I removed the decorations, took the wreath down, and told myself it wasn't something to fight over. I even made myself believe that maybe next year would be better. Then this week arrived. I returned home after a work trip and found the living room filled with lights, stockings on the mantel, and holiday songs playing in the background. They were decorating the tree, laughing together. I stood at the doorway, watching for a second, thinking maybe it was meant as a surprise for me. But then I heard my mom say, "It's so peaceful not having George here to ruin everything." I froze. I didn't even know what to say. I stepped into the room and the laughter stopped. "Oh," my mom said with no emotion. "You're back earlier than we thought. I guess I missed the message about not doing Christmas again," I said, keeping my voice steady. She didn't blink. She looked at me directly and said, "We're not including you in Christmas this year." Just like that. I don't know what she expected me to do. Yell, cry, ask to join? I didn't do anything. I simply nodded, walked into the kitchen, pulled out my laptop, and while they kept putting ornaments on the tree I wasn't welcome to touch, I logged into my mortgage account, clicked on the option to remove myself as co-borrower, and when the system asked me if I was sure, I clicked yes without even thinking twice. But that wasn't the final chapter. Not at all. Because once they saw what I'd done and what that meant, the fake kindness disappeared fast. That's when things really blew up. 3 days later, I was eating lunch in my workroom when my phone started buzzing nonstop. First came a message from Mom. "George, what did you do to the mortgage?" Then another one in full caps. "Stop being ridiculous." "This isn't funny." I didn't answer. Not right away. I just stared at the screen. The words were blurry, like my brain was lagging. I figured they'd catch on at some point, but I didn't think it would be this quick. I thought I'd have at least a few more days. Honestly, I didn't think they'd care that much. Turns out they did. My mom tried calling. I let it ring. Then she called again. I ignored that too. Eventually she left a voicemail. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe an apology? Nope. "George, this is cruel. The house is supposed to belong to all of us. It's not something you can use to hurt us. I didn't raise you to be this way. Call me back." That final line, "I didn't raise you to be this way," it actually made me laugh, out loud. The irony could have been spread like butter. When I stepped inside that night, the place felt strangely still, way too silent. Usually, Frank would be yelling at his console, and Henry would be faking repairs somewhere. But now, just quiet. The soft buzz of the fridge filled the air, along with a burnt smell coming from the kitchen, likely one of Henry's weird dinner attempts gone wrong. I walked in like always, set my keys on the shelf, kicked off my sneakers. I didn't expect an attack waiting in the living area, but all three of them were there. Mom, Henry, and Frank, lined up like a panel of judges on the couch. "You have to undo what you did," Mom said, eyes avoiding mine. "Hey there, Mom. Great to be back," I replied, tossing my laptop case by the steps. "Quit pretending," Frank barked. "You messed with the property stuff. That's against the law." I lifted a brow. "Against the law? You mean changing ownership on the place I paid for? It doesn't only belong to you," Mom hissed. "We've stayed here. We made it our home. You've been living here rent-free," I shot back. "That's not the same thing." Henry finally spoke, voice quiet. "You're doing the wrong thing, kid." "I'm not your child," I snapped without thinking. Silence hit the room like a punch. That comment landed hard. Henry looked away and something in Mom's face shifted. Not pain, not sorrow, just blank. Like she'd been wearing that fake look for so long, she forgot it was fake. "After all we gave you," she said, voice low. Something inside me cracked wide open. "Oh, you mean the part where you tricked me into paying for your house while making me the family's target? Or maybe the time you threw a party and didn't invite me, even though I live here? Which memory are we talking about?" "Stop being over the top," she muttered like always. Like that phrase could erase any hard truth. I strolled to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed cold water. My hands were shaking just a little. Not from fear, but a different kind of energy. It was sharp, controlled, final. Something had shifted inside me that couldn't be undone. "You know," I said, leaning on the counter, "I used to think it was me, that if I worked harder, paid more, kept quiet, I'd finally belong here." "George," Mom started, voice too sweet, too fake. "But now I understand," I cut her off. "You don't want a son. You want someone to pay the bills and never ask questions. That's not who I am anymore." I took a sip, looked at each of them. Frank's face was red. his leg bouncing like a nervous kid. Henry was totally blank, the way someone gets after years of giving up. And Mom, she looked like she was about to say something mean but couldn't find the words, so I did it for her. I already talked to a lawyer, I said. Technically, you're just residents here, but since there's no lease agreement, you've got 30 days to leave. Not a word, just stillness. You're really kicking out your own mother? She asked, voice shaking now. After all I've done for you? You stopped acting like a parent the second you turned me into your bank account. The silence in the room was, even the couch seemed to hold its breath. Then Frank stood up fast, smacking the table with his knee. This is nuts. You can't do this. I can, I replied calmly. And I'm going to. I turned, headed upstairs, ready to lock my door and let them deal with it. But as I reached the top, I heard her voice again. You think you're the good guy, she yelled. But this won't be forgotten. Family remembers. I paused just a second, turned back enough for her to hear me, not see me. Good, I said. I hope you remember every bit of it. I closed my door and sat at my desk, breathing in slow. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt tight, like the sky before a thunderstorm, because I knew this wasn't the end, and they were going to fight back harder than ever. The following day started with a silence that didn't feel calm. It felt off, not peaceful, more like the uneasy quiet that lingers after a huge fight, where even small noises sound louder than usual. I could hear someone moving below, clinking plates just a bit too loudly, like they were trying to be passive-aggressive over breakfast. I didn't bother heading downstairs. I wasn't ready for another round, and I knew they weren't either. Not yet, but that quiet was just the warning before things really started. By that evening, the real pushback had begun. It kicked off with my mom sliding a paper under my bedroom door. Yes, an actual handwritten letter in neat script. 3 full pages, written on her fancy note cards she normally reserved for birthdays. The first line read, I'm speaking as a mother who deeply cares about her son, not someone trying to control him. Sure, the whole letter was one big guilt trap. She wrote about everything she gave up for me, about how she worked 2 jobs after my father walked out, how she never once complained, she did though. She even brought up how I used to cry when I scraped my knee, and how she was always there to comfort me. Then came the emotional weight. She wrote about how painful it was to see the family breaking down, about how my behavior was tearing us apart, about how I had let money make me cold and distant. The final line, I just want my son back. Please don't go through with this. I finished reading with a tight feeling in my chest, not because I believed a word of it, but because a part of me still wished I could. That's always how it was with my mother. She didn't raise me with kindness. She raised me through pressure, and that kind of upbringing is hard to shake. I didn't respond. The next morning, things got worse. Henry saw me coming out of my room and stood in the hallway like a cheap security guard. You know, he said with his arms folded, this house doesn't only belong to you. We've done plenty around here. I blinked at him. You changed a bulb last month. He didn't like that. His jaw tightened. This isn't how families act. No, I said, stepping past him. But it's exactly how a landlord deals with people who don't pay. Later that day, I noticed the thermostat had been locked. My mom suddenly decided that the upstairs bathroom was off limits. The laundry times were randomly rearranged without telling me. Childish, immature, but it didn't stop there. That night, I found Frank sitting in my office using my computer. He was in my chair, clicking through my open tabs like it was totally normal. What are you doing? I asked, holding back my tone. He looked up slowly, like I was bothering him. Chill out, he said. I'm just looking at something. You always act like everything is yours. It is mine, I replied firmly. Yeah? He said as he stood up, voice dropping lower. Maybe it's time you stop pretending you're above everyone. You're not better than us, George. I didn't answer. Then he added, one day you're going to be the one begging for support. And when that day comes, I hope we remind you of this. It was almost laughable, me needing help from them. I wanted to laugh, but instead, I just shut the door and turned the lock. That night, I started putting a chair under the doorknob when I went to sleep. I wish I could say that was just anxiety, but the next morning, I found scratch marks on the doorframe near the lock, like someone had tried to force it open. That's when I stopped trying to play nice. I began keeping records, took pictures, saved messages. I set up a hallway camera pointed right at my door. I printed the state's tenant laws and highlighted every rule that allowed me to evict them legally, and I started preparing, not just to get them out, but to leave myself. Because even if they were gone, the house would still feel heavy. A place full of old fights and tension I couldn't forget. 2 days later, the final line was crossed. I came home from work, stepped into the kitchen, and froze. They'd gone into my fridge, the shelf where I kept my own food, my leftovers, my yogurt, the Thai dishes I liked. Everything had been dumped. All of it in the trash. The shelf was empty. A note was stuck to the fridge door. One word, Community. No name, no explanation, just that. I didn't shout. I didn't stomp through the house yelling questions. I walked upstairs, opened my laptop, typed up a formal eviction letter, printed a hard copy, and slid it under the door to the living room, where they were watching some garbage TV show. Roughly 5 minutes later, I heard Frank shout, "What the heck is this?" I didn't give him an answer. Not that night. But I already knew they'd show up eventually. And when they did, they didn't come alone. That's when the next stage of their drama began. This time, they brought in the extended family. The night I gave them the official eviction document, I realized peace was out of reach. They weren't going to leave quietly. That just wasn't their style. What I didn't expect was how hard they'd try to spin the story. It kicked off with Aunt Linda. She phoned me the following morning, her voice full of fake warmth, like she had already picked her team, but was pretending not to. "George, honey, I heard there's been some trouble at home. Your mom's really hurting," she said. "I heard you're throwing them out." I sighed. "Linda, they've lived in my house without paying a single dollar for nearly 4 years. They haven't helped with anything. I'm simply asking them to finally step up." She paused and then said, "I just don't think that's very Christian of you, especially during the holidays." And there it was, the guilt tactic, the usual family trick. Make me feel like the bad guy while they completely rewrite what's happening. Over the next several days, I got messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, 3 of them. 2 pretended to be casually checking in. 1 sent me a Bible quote with a sarcastic twist. Even my grandmother, who hadn't been fully aware for the past 2 Thanksgiving dinners, somehow managed to leave a voice message saying, "George, don't hurt your poor mom like this." You'd think I'd be mad, but instead I felt something else. Clear-headed. Like a fog had lifted and everything finally made sense. This was the game, the structure, an emotional scam where my mom was the boss, feeding her version of reality to everyone else. And I was done playing along. I stopped answering texts. I went to work, came home, took notes on everything that happened, and waited. The 30 days were ticking down, and each week the house got colder, both in feeling and in temperature. Mom suddenly forgot to use the heat. Frank banged doors. Henry sulked around. The entire place was heavy with unspoken tension. I stayed out of it, kept to myself, slept with my door locked, made my own meals, waited. 3 days before the deadline, I wrote a post on Facebook. Calm, director. Just the truth. No name calling, no shouting. "Hi, everyone. I want to clear up a few things being spread around. Years ago, I agreed to live with my mom, stepfather, and brother. I paid the full down payment on the home and have paid 95% of the total costs ever since. Despite trying many times to create shared responsibility, I've been met with manipulation and silent mistreatment. After being left out of family events inside the home I paid for and seeing my boundaries constantly disrespected, I made the legal choice to send them a notice to move out. This wasn't done out of revenge, but because I value my peace. I wish them no harm, but I will no longer sacrifice my sanity just to protect someone else's version of family." Then I signed out. That post didn't just stop the guilt tripping, it completely shut it down. A handful of people tried to keep the drama alive, but most gave up once I showed solid proof, messages, emails, and pictures of what had been broken. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't reveal all the details. I didn't need to. The truth was more than enough. When the day finally came for them to move out, I didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't say a thing. A friend came over with his pickup, and I used it to carry their things, what little was worth taking, to the front yard. I boxed it all up on my own, labeled everything, and kept it peaceful. Frank stepped outside and shouted something about me betraying the family, but I didn't reply. Henry stayed quiet, eyes down. Mom stared at me, but not with anger or sadness. She looked stunned, like she truly believed I'd back out at the last second, but I didn't. They drove off in the middle of the day. No goodbye, no hug, no words. Just the sound of their tires crunching over the driveway as they disappeared down the road. When their car was gone, I shut the door, locked it, and just stood there. The silence in the house was unlike anything before. No banging from upstairs, no video game noise shaking the walls, no emotional tricks, no guilt, just me. And for the first time in years, I felt something real, quiet that felt good. In the weeks that followed, I deep cleaned the house, gave the walls fresh paint, changed the door locks, turned my office back into a workspace, and made the extra room into a music area like I'd always wanted. I even put the Christmas decorations up again, because I wanted to. I invited friends over for the first time in years. We played board games, watched silly movies on the backyard projector, laughed more in 1 month than I had in the last few years, and I finally slept well. Better than I had in a decade. I still sometimes get a message from someone in the family trying to convince me to fix things, but I ignore it. I'm not holding a grudge. I'm not upset. I'm just finished. Because real revenge isn't about anger. It's choosing a better life, drawing a line, picking peace instead of pretending. That's how you win. So when she said, "We're not doing Christmas with you this year," I calmly replied, "That's fine." And now, I celebrate the holiday in my own way, with real joy, real music, and people who actually care, and not a single bitter glance or fake smile anywhere in sight.